Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. All right, this week, once again, two intros. An intro that is going to be timely, ripped right from the headlines, as there has been a lot of stuff going on in the world of late night television. And this episode was recorded about a month ago. So really what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick refresh about what's been happening. Last week we talked about this Late Show, or The Late Show with Stephen Colbert has been canceled by CBS. When we talked about this, the intro of last week's episode with Jed Rosenweig, the founder of Late Nighter, I shot an intro that was, the news was about 15 hours old. Maybe even less than that now that I think about it. I was told there'd be no math. Since that has happened, it appears that we might be having a circus-like momentum entering the world of late night television again. I think we might get one last hurrah. If late night television is going down with the sinking ship that is television broadcasting as we've known it for the past, three-quarters of a century or so, they're going to have one last, circus time moment, I think. The first circus time moment being, of course, there were rumblings of it early on with Carson and some of those times. But when Carson was leaving in 92, 93, that was when our first circus time was. And really, we really didn't get another one until the Conan, Jay Leno, implosion. I don't know what you'd call it, cratering at NBC. NBC has always been the network that was mocked and fumbled things even. Now it's CBS's turn. And I mean, I don't know. Someone can, again, I was told there'd be no math. Someone can do the math as to see how long The Tonight Show went before it went through its first, circus time. But boy, CBS is going through it now, announcing the canceling of Late Show. This week, boy, has a bunch of different responses come from a bunch of different places. Colbert has been great. I've been watching the late night shows in real time all week. I've been watching them the night they happen, not the next day, not scanning through them while I'm doing other work, things like that. It's cool. It's almost like late night has become, I don't know if dangerous is the right word, but late night has certainly become relevant and exciting again. And because of itself, because, CBS makes this announcement and you have all sorts of players getting involved and having fun with what has been happening. This past week, it was, CBS had said it was all financial reasons that this was happening. An $8 billion merger, I suppose that would classify as financial reasons, I suppose. But, they said a bunch of really classy things about Stephen Colbert, and then a leaked story, something about, him losing the show losing $40 million. I don't know how this stuff works and how sometimes in a ledger, one thing can look one way and another ledger things can look another way. I'm very curious is if that's what we're talking about here. I've been talking to a few people, nobody who's going to come on camera yet about this. And for a lot of people, it certainly does seem suspect. If you go to latenighter.com, you'll be able to see an archive of many of the happenings of this last week, including another article with Bill Carter talking about the institution of Late Show going away and how badly 32-ish years ago CBS wanted this franchise. And it wasn't that they wanted it 32 years ago, they got it. They wanted it for a long time, a franchise that would compete against the Tonight Show. And now it's being thrown away the way it is. Protests outside the Ed Sullivan Theater, a petition with over 250,000 signatures on it to keep Colbert on the air. I think we all know it's not going to happen because much bigger players seem to be a part of this. Is it the Trump effect? I don't know. I've had a bunch of people, former Letterman staffers, call me this week. Some who are pro-Trump, some who are against Trump, but many of these people, regardless of their political affiliation or leaning, think that it's something more than it being about money with Late Show with Stephen Colbert. It's a very, very interesting time to be a fan of this stuff again, and everybody seems to be talking about it. Everybody seems to be writing about it. On Monday night's Late Show, a bunch of the other late night hosts were there, including John Oliver, Jon Stewart, Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon appearing on the show, Adam Sandler. It was so funny. I mean, seeing Shooter McGavin sitting there with Happy Gilmore in the audience before a Stephen Colbert show was very, very funny. Stephen's lines have been very good. And then today, an article I read on Late Nighter, I believe, was about how CBS had made this decision beforehand because they wanted to give the Late Show the send-off it deserved and make the announcement before Skydance took over and started making changes to Colbert. That's a very interesting angle too. Lots of stuff out there. It's an exciting time, and again, it was always fun. Back when I was in high school, reading Late Shift and trying to follow this as best I could. Of course, seeing it happen in real time with Conan O'Brien and Jay Leno back in 2009, 2010, and Dave's response to it. I think most of the people who love this program, first off, what's wrong with you? Second off, we're all kind of in the same camp where this is the stuff that we really, really enjoy. It's the stuff that takes our mind off of life and entertains and so for some of us inspires, some of us odd folks inspires. The idea that this is going to happen again and could happen on as grand of a scale as it did back in 2009, 2010. Hey, if this thing's going to go out, let's go out with a bang. If it's going to change, let's change it with a bang. And I think it's really fun that we can all be a part of this. And please throw out your theories and whatnot. Our engagement on all of our channels have been up quite a bit. 5 or 6 people this week instead of 1 or 2 and my mom. The Letterman Podcast Facebook group. Come on, interact with us there. Leave comments on the show if you like. It's an interesting time to be a fan of late night television again, and the story is still unfolding and it's just beginning. Now, that being said, also today's guest, I'm really excited about, and I want to give it a second intro. The Hobbits love second breakfast. Don't you know about second breakfast? This is a second intro because I'm really, really a fan of Andrew Buss. I appreciate him so much. This episode is about Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman Is Me is the new documentary that hasn't been released yet, but it has been shown. It's been shown at the Tribeca Film Festival. At this point, I even asked today, I asked around a little bit. It seems like there's still no definitive date for wide release. Which is a shame from everything that I have heard, and you'll hear it in the conversation today with Andrew. It is an impressive piece of work and very different than any other documentary that has come out with Andy Kaufman being the subject. Very cool. So Andrew Buss, the historian, I'll repost his article with Vanity Fair, the oral history that included people like The Rock and David Letterman, of course, commenting on it. We'll post that in the Facebook group and through our channels as well, but I highly recommend it. So the Vanity Fair article, Andrew Buss, but came out about a month ago. Also an author. Andrew has written I Am McLovin, the definitive oral history about the movie Superbad. I Am McLovin, how Superbad became the biggest comedy hit of its generation. Again, told in the vantage point of an oral history with Andrew, of course, filling in all around. I'm so happy that he wrote this book. Superbad's one of those movies where I don't know if they could make it again. I think the tides of culture might be turning. The pendulum always swings back one way and then swings back the other. Perhaps when it swings back the other, a movie like Superbad could be made again. But at the same time, so many people. My best friend Mike, he was sort of featured on the show that we had a while back. I've had him on the show a couple of times, actually. He's been just sort of in the background. He's my buddy. He's got cancer. He's my best friend. And, so excited. He and I always, when we finish a phone call with each other, we go boop. And that boop means it's what the two characters in Superbad do at the end of the movie when they boop each other's nose. The best friends that just have this camaraderie with each other who had just been through an adventure together and they feel this way. That movie captured that in one of the most filthy ways possible with one of the best casts possible. And I just love the movie so much. So if you pick yourself up a copy of I Am McLovin and the definitive oral history about Superbad. And Yeah, just really, really excited to have Andrew on the show again here. It's funny, we talk about Andy Kaufman a lot, obviously, in this episode. I'm not gonna rehash anything. But the day that I'm recording this intro, a few hours ago, we just found out that Hulk Hogan passed away. And I believe Hulk Hogan has a connection with this whole thing that we love so much because of a show called Saturday Night's Main Event, because of interactions that happened early on with Late Night with David Letterman and the WWF, which was changing pro wrestling in some big ways. Dick Ebersol involved, highly involved with NBC, and just an interesting. There's some interesting stuff there, and we get into that a little bit in this episode. But with Hulk Hogan passing away, it's just one of the parallels with Andy Kaufman. We talk about this part in the show. Andy, when he had his legendary feud with Jerry Lawler in Memphis Championship Wrestling, he actually went to the Worldwide West Wrestling Federation, or the World Wrestling Federation, and pitched the idea to Vince McMahon Sr. And Vince McMahon Sr. said, "No, we don't want any of that entertainment stuff." And at which time Andy went down south, and it was a better decision anyway because of the wrestling culture down south and whatnot. We talk about that in the show. Another interesting parallel: Hulk Hogan, who passed away today at 71, was fired by Vince McMahon Sr. from the World Wrestling Federation because he starred in Rocky 3. And Vince McMahon Sr. didn't want any of that stuff. And after Vince Jr. took over and Rocky 3 was a big hit, he actually brought Hulk Hogan back. And that changed everything when it came to the world of professional wrestling. Hulk Hogan was, for me, he was a comic book hero come to life. That's who he was when I was growing up. That's what I saw. I was a comic book fan, and he looked like a guy that was ripped right out of the pages of the comic books. And the presentation of pro wrestling, man alive, did I believe in it. And that probably started earlier on. It probably started with the infamous appearance of Andy Kaufman on Late Night with David Letterman. We talk about that a lot. I'm hoping to have somebody who will make the Letterman wrestling connection, an expert in the world of pro wrestling from their standpoint, coming on. I don't want to say who it is right now, but I'm reaching out to them again, and we can maybe talk about that in a future episode. But rest in peace, Hulk Hogan, and rest in peace, Andy Kaufman. Continued peace and mischievous peace. I'm really excited about this episode and all the things going on in late night television these days. There you go. So that's the rip from the headlines intro for the show. Now, please enjoy this episode of the Letterman Podcast with our very special guest, the official Andy Kaufman historian and author of many things, many articles, many books, including this one, I Am McLovin, Andrew Buss.
Hey, this is Gabe Abelson, and you're watching the Letterman Podcast.
La, la, la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. Okay, Andrew Buss is back on the show, and the embargo is over. We can talk about Andy Kaufman. We can talk about the documentary because it has premiered. It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival last Friday, and from everything I've heard, the premiere went very well, and this Andy Kaufman Is Me documentary is that much closer to getting in front of all of our eyeballs, and hopefully that will be sooner than later. Of course, David Letterman, a producer on and Worldwide Pants, a producer on this amazing documentary by filmmaker Clay Tweel. The Rock was a producer on it, and Andrew Buss, who's been on the show before, of course. We talked about Carson the Magnificent because he was Bill Zemmy's protege, mentee, whatever you want to call it. And Andrew is also the official Andy Kaufman archivist, which is what an enviable position to have for people who love Andy Kaufman. My gosh, I can't believe that he gets to sit in this place of entertainment history that he does. And he is that guy. Andrew is a guy who really, really takes these stories of performers who were around before his time, many of them, and wants to make sure that the stories are shined up and given to other people. And I really appreciate that about Andrew. He and I, of course, just get right to it, start talking like we're old friends again. And I'm just really grateful for him coming on the show and being able to sit and talk with somebody and go deep about Andy Kaufman. That is like a highlight for my week. I could say that when I was in high school. I could say that when I was, in my early 20s, building my career. And up to this day, in my late 40s, I'm almost 50 years old, and I still could go deep and talk about Andy Kaufman for an hour and a half. We could go so long on this, and so we both had hard outs this morning, so we didn't get a chance to go as long as we could have, but we could have talked for hours about Andy Kaufman, his place in history, of course, the Letterman of it all, and he got a chance. Andrew got a chance. He's 2-0, and I'm over 2. I haven't had a chance to interview Dave on this show and talk to him yet. Andrew's talked to him a couple of times in this last couple of years, both in doing oral histories for the latest one being the Vanity Fair article on Andy Kaufman. I highly recommend you look at that. Go to the Letterman Facebook page, if the Letterman Podcast Facebook page, I should say, if you want to see a link to that. We have one sponsor only at the Letterman Podcast. That is hello-deli.com. Go to hello-deli.com for late show official merchandise curated by the man himself, Rupert G. I just want to say thank you very much for everybody who has been reaching out. More shows are coming soon. In any case, please enjoy my conversation with Andrew Buss. All right, Andrew, I have been wanting to talk to you about this subject from the very, very beginning, and I've always felt bad whenever I would start to approach you about questions, specifically just about Andy in general,
Right.
because I know you weren't allowed to talk about the doc. But now the doc has been shown. Andy Kaufman Is Me is out. Well, it was at the Tribeca Film Festival last weekend, and it's been revealed, and so now we can talk about it again. Can we talk about anything now at this point? Like, obviously, we don't want to spoil the doc too much, but can we talk about anything? Are all embargoes lifted?
All embargoes, as far as I know, are. And yeah, I mean, ask me anything, absolutely.
Right on. Okay, so Andy Kaufman, I think that I am certainly one of many Letterman enthusiasts who also have this kinship with Andy Kaufman. For me, Dave was the gateway to Andy, even as a child. And it's very interesting. It's really interesting we're having this conversation right now because I'm literally maybe a week or two out of watching the Paul Rubens documentary. And when you talk
Oh,
about,
really?
yeah, when you talk about a couple of performers who were performance artists in many respects, the idea, I know how much Andy loved appealing to kids and things like that. I always thought that there was some sort of a connection between Paul and Andy. And now this Andy Kaufman documentary is out. It's a good time to be a fan of these things. I'm just curious, what was your role with the documentary? And we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, so uh I was the archival consultant on the documentary.
Hmm. The archive.
Um
You're
I
you're the
yeah,
official Andy Kaufman historian, correct?
I am. I'm the official historian. I'm the official archivist. I've been the official historian slash archivist since 2015, I guess we can say.
Yep.
So it's been 10 years now that I've been doing that. And it's brought me on a wild kind of journey, and doing things being places I never thought I'd be, and getting to interact with really interesting people along the way.
Up including to right, this very moment as we're talking
Yeah.
here, your article in Vanity Fair just came out. Just to drop a couple of names of people that you interviewed for that article, for that the oral history presentation you did: The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, David Letterman himself, of course. Again, that's number 2, right?
Yes, for David Letterman. Yes,
That's
that is number two.
pretty crazy. So Andy, in that respect, showing a guy like The Rock, and the fascination that he has with Andy, it really shows what Andy and his body of work did for those of us who love, entertainment. I mean, I don't even know how to peg. How would you peg Andy Kaufman as a performer? How would you describe him?
As a performer, I would say Andy was someone that was really I was really interested in kind of getting a reaction out of the audience. Not always bad. People said, "Oh, he wanted the audience to hate him." It wasn't that. He wanted the audience to like him like any other performer. But at the same time, when he was playing like the bad guy wrestler, then yeah, he would want you to boo because that was the character. The character was the bad guy, and he kind of fed off of that energy. But you know, if he was on stage as Foreign Man, obviously he would want. I mean, and the whole. I don't want to get too far into the weeds with this, but I definitely, as a performer, I would say that Andy was someone that was about having fun. Um, he used to say when he was on stage that it was, you know, that it was like his living room. Like that was kind of he was inviting people into his house. And I really think that that's something important to note about Andy is that, like everything else he did in life, being on stage, it was just about having fun.
Mhm. The idea about getting a reaction from people. Yeah, it seemed that like I think you and I've talked about this on camera before, but certainly off camera. You know, I've got a lot of pro wrestlers in my life. I happen to have I owned or was a co-founder of a charity pro wrestling promotion up here in Canada, and through
Yeah.
that 6 year adventure, I certainly learned a lot about psychology in the sense of how you can take a crowd of people and you can bring them up and you can bring them down and you can take them to certain places. You can make them feel certain things, all the way from, blood spitting anger to almost joyful bliss. And you can do it in a very short period of time. Um, Andy had a persona that he, his Tony Clifton persona, which was in many respects an antagonist as an entertainer. It just seemed like he had this fascination with taking people on a journey. I
Yes.
hate to say manipulation of emotions, but things like that. Now you've talked to his family, like you've really, really gone down the rabbit hole here. Did they see that as well with him? Was that always something that was there growing up, or was that something that he explored parallel to his performing years?
In terms of what exactly?
The emotional, just the idea of human emotion,
Oh
like
yeah.
the idea of being able to take somebody and alter how they're feeling and maybe guide how they're feeling.
No, that was definitely very important to him. That's something that they saw and they would tell me about. I mean, really, and it wasn't just Andy being in charge of that emotion. Like, if you could really kind of get one over on Andy, he enjoyed that just as much. But yeah, I mean, ever since growing up, that was a big part of kind of his DNA was getting that out of people, and just his mom had a quote that I always really loved, which is his mom, Janice Kaufman, that was with Andy, it has to be about fun. He won't do it if it's not fun. And so and for him, fun was getting those emotions. And um, I mean, you mentioned the word journey. I think that's as great a kind of definition of what he did as anything. Even not even just on stage, everything with Andy was a journey, and he was always bringing people along for the ride with him, even as a kid.
Oh, that's childlike. Like when you would look at his reactions on stage, especially as Foreign Man, you talk about, as a child, the idea that he could go back to that childlike joy or simplicity, meekness almost, and then could then move over to, that antagonistic type behavior. It just shows the range of emotion and the range of Andy's ability. Did he ever want to, um, was performing in front of an audience his sweet spot, or
Yeah.
would if he would have extended and been able to, explore film and things like that more, was that something he would have leaned deeper into, do you think?
Absolutely. And the thing with him is he did make two films.
Yep.
Technically, you could say he was in a third one, which was the first film, I guess you could technically say. He's got like a very brief cameo in it was oh my God. Name of the film is God Told Me to. Larry, who was director?
Okay.
He was a
You keep going, I'll get you that.
God Told Me. I can't remember off the top of my head. But so he did that film. He did a Marty Feldman movie called In God We Trust. And
Yep.
then he did in which he played Richard Pryor played God. Andy played like an evangelical kind of yeah, like one of the televangelists, I guess they would
Yep.
be called later on.
Yep.
Played one of those guys, but it was thick Southern drawl. And then he did Heartbeats with Bernadette Peters. So
Yep.
he had done a couple movies, but really he had some of his own ideas for movies. Two of the ones that I know of. The first one was the Tony Clifton story. That's kind
Yep.
of most famously the one he had been working on. Spent a couple of years co-writing it, trying to get it made. The thing that happened was it was at Universal, and then Universal said, "Well, first let's see if you could headline a movie before we do Tony Clifton's story." So
Yep.
he did Heartbeeps first. Heartbeeps, unfortunately, did not work, and so as a result, Tony Clifton's story never got made. The other idea he had uh, was to remake the film Miracle in Milan uh, with Foreign Man as the lead. That was his other idea for a movie. So even with his kind of conceptual ideas of movies, um, it was kind of off the beaten path. I mean, with him, I mean, people are kind of surprised. Sometimes when I talk about it, he was, a pretty big cinephile because he had grown up. Um, in the documentary, his brother Michael refers to him as being, a child of television, and he definitely was.
Hmm.
He grew up watching, all the TV shows like Howdy Doody was a big part of his upbringing, of course, and they talk about it in the documentary, but also with but also movies. Anytime they would air movies, he would watch A Face in the Crowd. I know was a big kind of influence on him and kind of I think at one point he also had wanted Foreign Man to do a remake of that. And I don't know if it's Foreign Man. I think he just would have liked to have done a remake of A Face in the Crowd. And then Fellini was another big hero of his. Eight and
Yeah.
a Half is a movie he really enjoyed. So yeah, I mean, he was definitely a cinephile, and
Well, even you
yeah,
look at Larry Cohen, by the way.
Larry Cohen. Thank you.
No,
Yes,
no, that's okay. But
it's
I even look at
7:15 here, so in the morning. So
yeah, no, no, all good, all good. You have a lot of things bouncing around in that head of yours. When it comes to,
yes,
this, a variety of subjects. I admire minds like yours, being able to pull out quotes like that. But you look at like, I mean, and you didn't even include for a film. I mean, My Breakfast with Blassie. To me, you
yes,
talk about
yes. That would be
remakes.
a
You
film.
talk about remakes, and the idea of taking the
It's
My Dinner with
absolutely
Andre
insane. It really is.
blueprint and putting it on. And I mean, again, back then I loved pro wrestling. After, like, I found a copy of that when I was pretty young, all things considered. That infamous night on late night was a gateway. But I up here in Canada tried to consume as much Andy Kaufman material as I possibly could. And I remember watching My Breakfast with Blassie, and he's not playing to an audience. He's got a film crew
No,
around him. They're in a diner, and watching, Classy Freddie Blassie just do some of the things that he did, and Andy just rolling along with it. Um, I wonder if there was a part of him that just liked to kind of make himself laugh inside. I feel like he was putting on
oh
a show
yeah.
for himself much of the time. The idea that he's this, accomplished performer, but he goes and gets a job as a busboy just to kind of have the experience of it. And you got to wonder almost like, was he putting on a show for himself in his head much of the time?
I've never taken him as doing it I mean, so much of what he did was what he enjoyed, and he was very, um, he had a very clear vision, and everything he did was very calculated in regards to that, and kind of his idea of entertainment and what he enjoyed doing. But also at the same time, I mean, I would say he was not the most generous laugher. That's
Mm,
the other thing about him. Um, he would do like a little bit of a sheepish kind of shy laugh, but the people talking to his family and friends, it became clear that yeah, he wouldn't necessarily laugh at kind of the normal things that most people would laugh at.
yep.
I'd say one example is he would be in one of his friends, Wendy, told me they'd be in the comedy club together, and it'd be comic after comic, and Andy, whole crowd's laughing. Andy would lean over and go, "I don't know why this is fun."
Right.
Um, but then when Robin Williams would go on stage, Andy would lean over and say, "I get why this is funny." He still wouldn't laugh, but
Yep.
he understood why Robin was funny. And so that really kind of, and it wasn't a mean-spirited thing. It's just, he was just not, that just wasn't part of him. And the other thing with him is, as you can see demonstrated on David Letterman at one point, this is a very real moment. If you're looking for a real moment, this is very much one. As far as telling a joke, he used to say, I've never told a joke in my life. And a lot of jokes would kind of go over his head in a way.
Hmm.
And I mean, he was, and not to say that, oh, he wasn't smart enough to get, that's not it at all. He was just deeply intelligent, brilliant, kind of surveyor
Yep.
of society in a way, and just deeply brilliant person. But as far as jokes, he just didn't really have much interest in hearing them. But if you look at Late Night with David Letterman, there is when he does kind of that, I guess you call him like a circus freak kind of character,
Hmm.
where he's in a diaper singing Rosemary, which I brought up to David Letterman recently, and he's like, I forgot that happened. He's like, boy, how did I forget that? So, and so at one point they're sitting on a couch together,
Yep.
and they're on the couch. Andy's on the couch. I don't know why I phrased it like that. So they're doing panel afterwards, um, and Dave at one point goes asks Andy about heartbeats, and Andy said, "Oh no, hardly no one saw it." He said, "What I want to do," he said, "I'm so embarrassed I made that movie. I want to offer." Everyone to get their money back. I'm working with my lawyers on getting everyone their money back. To which Dave goes, "You better have change for a 20." Um, a typical Letterman
It's a
joke, and
great
then
line. Yep.
Andy looks confused. He's like, "What was that?" And then Letterman's like, "Oh, it's nothing, Andy. I didn't even hear it." And Letterman says it again, and Andy doesn't react to the joke. He says, Letterman's like, change for a 20, implying that nobody saw it. And Andy
Hmm.
goes, "Oh, nobody saw it. That's why the movie didn't do well." Just
Yeah.
complete kind
No,
of
he no sold it completely. And whether he
yes.
misunderstood it or not, and that's the question. Do you think he misunderstood that? Like, did he view life like would he be labeled today as, I think this is an overused label, but would he be labeled as spectrum? Is like, is it his perception of the world just that different, or is he more the, Steve Young, wrote for Dave forever. He calls it the broken comedy writer. Like Steve Young, when he finds something hilarious, this is what you get from Steve Young. Yeah, that's what you get from him. You just one little laugh. That's it. And he calls it
Yeah,
the
I
broken comedy writer syndrome. Is that part of it as well?
maybe that's a little bit of it, but I'll tell you the things that Andy got the most joy of that I've heard on these 84 hours of tapes, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But
Yep. Yep.
the thing he got the most joy of out of was he's really happy in a lot of those tapes when he's doing like kind of theater on the street, I guess he would call it, or just interacting with friends or family. Friends or family could get him to laugh. He was a generous laugher in that regard, just
Hmm.
not with traditional stand-up or jokes or anything. So I think it might be a bit of a broken comedy writer. Maybe. I mean, you can't spend so much time. If you spend so much time in a comedy club, it is hard to hear fresh and kind of original ideas. And he spent a lot of time around comedians. I mean, that really became kind of his um I
That was
mean
his
that's
truth.
just where he would go. I
Yep.
mean, he would just spend time in comedy clubs. And even though he would spend time in comedy clubs, um it's not very he wouldn't necessarily get that close with the
Hmm.
comedians, although they all had their encounters and their moments with him of kind of shared experience with him. But
Hmm.
um there were some exceptions, obviously, like Elaine Boozler and him were very close. And there were definitely a couple other comics that he did become close with. But yeah, in terms of kind of, I mean, it was just he was very interested what he was interested in.
Yeah. Oh, I think, and
And
I love that. I love that he went hard into the paint, like something like pro wrestling. And I mean, you and I have talked about this a little bit off camera. Um, I fully believe that when pro wrestling changed to sports entertainment, everyone credits Vince McMahon for that, and Vince McMahon, of course,
right.
built a $1 billion company out of something that was typically seen as lower brow and whatnot. And I understand that transformation that he made. I believe if there was a shot that was fired to create to morph pro wrestling into sports entertainment. It was Andy on Late Night with David Letterman. I think it was, and it was not with the Vince McMahon character. It was with a different wrestling promotion because the crew that Vince's group was with, World Wrestling Federation at the time, they weren't interested. They passed on Andy, and that to me was a phenomenal. I mean, I don't think it could have worked out if it wasn't somebody like Jerry Lawler. But the idea that he would lean into something
Yes.
that so many of the masses considered, probably most generously, a little secret. I'm a pro wrestling fan, but I keep it kind of secret. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. Andy went right down that path and completely, in my opinion, helped make it become the mainstream thing that it was. And it was because Howdy Doody, his interview with Howdy Doody. Again, this is something that's out of the cultural lexicon for a long, long time. And yet, as he's talking to Howdy Doody, you almost see like he's about to, the emotion that's there is so palpable. And that's, I think, if I was inspired by Andy with one overarching thing, and perhaps you could say the same thing, it's when I'm into something, I really, really go down that path and get into
Oh,
it. And it's
same.
pretty clear that's what Andy was like.
Absolutely. He absolutely was. And I do want to bring up, you're talking about kind of him wrestling in Memphis. I think, and with Jerry Lawler, I think it was so important for him to have his vehicle there versus kind of the Madison Square Garden kind of crowd
Yep.
that he initially was going after. So I think Vince McMahon Sr. turning Andy down, while it was a bit of a blow, I think what he was trying to do, so much of it is specific and it's very centric to going down south to wrestle.
Yep.
It's the idea
Yep.
of Holly, and the character that he took on, and we have to call it character because it was absolutely a character. I want
Oh,
to make
he was a
that
monster heel.
abundantly clear.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the heel. Like that was like
A monster
it
heel, not just
was
a heel. He
Monster
you talk
Hill.
about this
He
emotion.
was the worst kind of guy you could imagine. That's literally who he was playing, was the worst kind of misogynistic, chauvinist guy, and that was not who he was. He didn't believe any of it, but that's who he played. And that's the thing, by the way, that is so brilliant about him, is that he would commit himself to it to the point where people would believe he was that guy,
Yeah.
and he just didn't seem to have an issue with it. Like
Yeah.
the people around him might have had issues with it, but he never had an issue with people confusing him with that guy because he knew it was so inflated and so ridiculous. And I don't know if he ever was surprised that people took it as seriously as they did, but I mean that's just because he was that gifted, because
Hmm.
he made the audience believe it, and I admire not caring. Like when people say, "Oh, he didn't care if the audience liked him or not," I don't think it was that. I think he did want to be liked like anyone else. But I think where he didn't care was when he was playing that bad guy wrestler.
Yep.
He didn't care if the perception of him was a little skewed because of it. I
Yeah.
don't. Um,
Or reading The Great
although,
Gatsby on stage and
yeah,
committing, like you talk about committing to the bit, to the point where
right.
people angry with him or whatever, and then leaving whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm
And then
committing to this bit because the bit is more
absolutely.
important. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was commitment. And then I think a little bit towards the end he did. I think one of the regrets might have been because he was doing all the wrestling, and then I guess the Maharishi found out about it. He was big into transcendental meditation. I guess the Maharishi or Maharishi's camp had found out about it, and then he was supposed to go on this retreat as a teacher, something as a TM teacher, something he was deeply passionate about. This was
Hmm.
something that was so part of his soul,
Hmm.
was transcendental meditation. He was deep into it. And to get told that, I mean, he would go on month-long retreats all throughout the world.
Hmm.
Um, he wasn't a guy that would vacation, but he was a guy that would go to these retreats. And to get told that you're not invited because of the wrestling you're doing, I think that deeply hurt him. And I think that did confuse him. I think that confused him because, well, how can you believe this is real? Like,
Right.
how can you think that like, I think part of it might have been, who I am. Like, that I've dedicated I'm, yeah, that he was this purely devoted, person towards transcendental meditation.
Hmm.
Going back to the wrestling thing, I think it only worked that he went down south to do it, because playing that character, the Hollywood character, um, doing it on the East Coast in New York wouldn't have worked as much,
No.
because it had to be so far removed from entertainment. It had to be so far removed. It had to be with not that people in New York or LA are not like real salt of the earth type of people, but it had to be with people that don't have encounters with celebrity, don't have
Yep.
encounters with. I'm trying to pick my words very carefully with it, but it had to be with a certain type of people,
Yes.
middle America people,
Yep.
people down south, that just don't that just have their things that they enjoy. And then Andy coming in as the interloper. I don't think he could have been an interloper in New York.
Not in the same
I mean, he
way.
was a New
No.
York guy. I think part of it, to the full extent of that character, it had to be down south, and it had
Yeah.
to be Jerry Lawler. It had to be a beloved fixture down south. Everything about it worked so much better than it ever could have worked in New York, I believe. And
I.
then
Yep. I
he
could.
took that energy to New York, to David Letterman, and then that's when, because people had known about the wrestling and thought, oh, that's something kind of odd that Andy's doing down there. They're thinking, oh,
Yeah.
he's down south doing something. We don't know what, but he's doing something down there. And then the match on April 5th with Jerry Lawler brought nationwide attention, especially when Andy wound up in the hospital for 3 days, and would then go around with the neck brace on. Anywhere he could get photographed with the neck brace on, he would make sure he had that neck brace on. He's being interviewed by Orson Welles when he has the neck brace on. When Orson Welles was on the oh my God, was it Merv? Yeah, I think it was Merv. I think he was
Merv.
guest
It was
hosting
Merv. Yeah.
Merv. Yeah, and Andy has the neck brace on. And
You
so
talk about committing to the bit. Like again, that's
absolutely,
oh.
that was commitment. At one point, he even tried to have Latka on Taxi wear the neck brace, and that he was told no, Latka cannot have a neck brace, and so I think at that point, when he had to take it off, maybe the people at Taxi knew, oh, he was just messing around, but everybody suspected that the neck brace wasn't needed. I mean, Jerry Lawler has that great line where he says, "I don't know if that's a neck brace or a flea collar." Like, um, great line. And we have to talk about that a little bit. We have to talk about what happened on that show, I think. I
Absolutely.
don't
Well,
mean to
I'd like
take
to do that,
over.
and I want to talk about the doc itself. Let's talk about that because we're in that vein right now. But
Yeah.
then I want to talk about how different this doc is compared to the other material that's out there. But let's talk about that night a little bit
Yes.
because, you talk about people being in on it, not being in on it. From my perspective, I've talked to segment producers, the writers on the show, some of the people who literally he stormed past to go through the exit doors. Very few people were in on it. Very few people, and I think
Yeah.
that's the magic of a wrestling angle. Even to this very day, when this art or this company can take an audience, whether it's a television audience or if it's just a live crowd, and they can suspend the disbelief, and a big part of that ingredient to that doing it well is people not being in on it. Now, Dave famously, of course, Meryl Marco, Dave's original head writer and girlfriend at
Of
the
course.
time, she wanted to play with that because of Dave's wit. She wanted to surprise what she refers to as surprise the host. She liked surprising the host because in this particular case, our host happens to be, one of the greatest rapier wits of all time.
Yeah.
And his reactions are incredible, but hated surprises. So no, don't surprise me. I don't want surprises. Let's not make that part of the show. My reactions will come across like they are surprises. We'll make sure that that's the case. We'll find that common balance. Here you have something where, I mean, it to virtually everybody, something that happened, which was outrageous, headlines everywhere. Jerry
Yeah.
Lawler told me himself that Robert Morton used to tell him that they referred to that as the famous show back in
The
the day
famous show.
because Letterman was very, very young still at this time. Um,
Yes, this was, this is what people forget. This was not, oh, this was, like he had been on a couple years. This was July. Oh, was it the 27th? It might have been. This was late July, I believe.
yep,
And the wrestling match was on April 5th. And Letterman's first show was February 1st.
yep.
Right?
It was
Yeah, I
February.
think.
February. Yeah, it was February. It was early February. Yeah,
Early
absolutely.
February, yeah. It might have been the second, but I know it was that first week. So less than that's that's like 6 months.
July
Like
28th,
that's
82. Yeah.
July
So,
28th, 82.
yeah,
Okay. I was
yeah.
off by day, but
No,
yes.
yeah, you had it. You had it.
I had that vicinity. Yes.
That's why they call it the famous show. It's the one that kind of put Letterman on the
Yeah.
map in many respects. Yeah.
I mean, think about something like that happening to this young show, and Letterman, as he's told me, and he's told a lot of people, the next day in the New York Times, it said, it wrote about this, as he calls it, Letterman laughs about it. He said he wrote about it like it's this assault that happened. Mr. Kaufman was slapped by Mr. Lawler on Late Night with David Letterman. Like as if there were no TV cameras there, as if it was like a gossip column. Like, oh, I saw over at Studio 54 that Andy got slapped by Jerry. Like they're writing about it as if it wasn't on television.
Yeah.
Like it is wild, as if it was not part of a show that is going for comedy. But the thing, as far as who knew and who didn't know, I think it's interesting. I think over time, people might think they knew or might think they didn't know. So it does change. Letterman, when I talked to him, he did say that he knew. He said he always knew what Andy was going to do, and he
Yep.
said that he told me. But here's one of the things, many things I love about Letterman is um, some of the is his usage of analogies and kind of with certain things. Like he like one of the first things he said was being with Andy was like spending a day at the carnival. That
Yep.
was one he did, and then another one he did was. Oh my God. I'm gonna pull this up because I do not want to get this wrong because I love this too much. Give me just
Yeah,
about
no, no, no,
10
no, it's okay. I love
seconds.
that quote too. You wrote that in the Vanity Fair article. That was one of the Letterman quotes that made that oral history. I'm fascinated with
Y-
the
y-
entire conversations from some of these people,
Yeah.
because you take these snippets and you create this beautiful narrative. But the conversations themselves to me. I'm the deep dive guy. I would love to hear what The Rock had to say about all of this, like
Yeah.
unedited. I would love to hear what Letterman said because he does. He speaks in these beautiful sound bites. Spending a day with
He
Andy was like a day
does.
at the carnival. Or spending time with Andy was like a day at the carnival. I'm curious about some of these other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one with Letterman that I have to bring up that he said one of the many nice things about Andy is you would get a rough outline. It was like a menu at Denny's. He would tell you what he was up to generally, so there were never any surprises except that the performer had outlined that the performance that he had outlined was always interesting and exciting.
Yep,
Um, so yeah, I mean, I that captured my imagination. I had to shoehorn that one into the piece as well. A menu at
I
Denny's.
know.
I
Moon's
just,
over my
I
hammy. You think you know what you're gonna get. It's just an outline of what you're gonna get here. Here it is. The
yes,
what a
absolutely. And I love. I just that's one of those things that Letterman does that I love. It's just little,
Yep.
his play on words like um. Oh, is that? Yeah, I mean his play on words that people have always talked about, that he's really good with. And I know he's talked about that. I know Jay Leno has talked about that. Who
Oh,
who I was having lunch yesterday at Don Cuco's in here in Burbank. Not here in Burbank, but in Burbank. I work in Burbank, and I looked up, and then Jay was just walking by down the sidewalk yesterday. That's kind of what life in Burbank is like.
absolutely.
But
No, David
and
Letterman is, I believe Jay calls him a wordsmith. He talks about
wordsmith,
how
yes.
he talks about Dave's vocabulary and just how
How he
articulate he
uses
is with
certain words
language.
in, I think he says instead of like a drink, he would say a beverage. I
That's
think
right.
that's the one that Jay always says.
That's right.
Um,
Tasty
Points
beverage.
to
And who doesn't deserve a tasty beverage, by the way?
exactly, and that's so much of what Letterman did, like his vocabulary, like what he would do. Um, just like it's so much, and you can see that in that Lawler incident as well. Like just that quick one-liner of just where he goes, you can use some of those words on television, but what you can't do is throw coffee. I've said it again and again. Just those little choices that Letterman makes. I love. And so yeah, even when I was talking to him, I was sick in bed this day. Yeah, I'm always sick right before I come on your show. But I was sick. I was really sick for a couple of weeks, and luckily it didn't prolong this appearance, but
Yep.
I was sick in bed, and I remember it was my birthday. I was really sick on my birthday, sick in bed all day. The only upside to my birthday, the only impactful moment, nothing impactful happened on the actual day except that I got to talk with David Letterman on my birthday,
Did he
and
remember you?
yeah, when I brought it up, he's like, "Oh, that's right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
talked for Conan," and then he said in the similar vein of this, and then he did end it by saying he's like, nice to talk with you again, and the next time you're doing one of these, meaning basically where I'm interviewing him about someone else, which is always feels kind of weird, but he was a producer on the documentary, so he got it. He said next time you do one of these, he just said, please consider me.
Oh my
And I thought
gosh.
that was interesting. I thought that was an interesting thing to say. Um,
Those are
and
the
it
words I
sounded
dream of
genuine.
hearing from David Letterman, and you that is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I want to
And
talk
you had
about the
asked
doc.
me,
Oh, go ahead.
oh,
Yeah, no,
I was
please
just
finish
going to
your
say,
thought.
you asked me last time if he turns the tables on me and starts
Yes.
asking me questions. He didn't do it so much the first time. This past time he did. This past time as we were talking, he's like, so I told him I tell him it's my birthday, wish me a happy birthday, and then he's like, he starts asking me about me. He's like, so where are you located? And I'm like, what do you do? And then when I told him that I'm the archivist, would ask me a question about Andy, and then he asked me about we started talking about some documentaries. He started talking to me about the Gallagher documentary, which he saw, and then I'd asked him, and then we started talking about the Paul Rubens documentary.
Mhm.
Um, and he's like, "Well, that Paul's another guy like Gallagher, like Andy, where they were so of that moment, but I feel like not so much Gallagher, but I feel like Andy and Paul both were able to transcend just." The 80s and transcend those moments, even though Andy never physically made it past the 80s. I
Yep.
feel like his work is still so respected. I mean, there was an Apple commercial. You cannot get more modern than Apple. And there was an Apple commercial that used this song, I Trusted You. And you hear it when you watch a commercial. I trusted you, I trusted you.
Hmm.
That's a song that Andy wrote. I mean, it's three words, but the melody and everything, that was something Andy did on the Midnight Special in 1977,
Yep.
almost 50 years ago. So almost 50 years later, you've got an Apple commercial showing Andy singing, or not showing Andy, but you have an Apple commercial with a song composed by Andy Kaufman. It's who would write songs and he did a couple things. He had a soundstage special in the early '80s, but that where he wrote a song called Wild Lovin' that was on that he wrote it for Elvis, and I believe he wrote it so he wouldn't they wouldn't have to clear a Elvis song because they didn't have that much of a budget.
Hmm.
But anyway, yeah,
So,
that was the thing I wanted to bring
well,
up
the
about the
trend
Letterman.
setting
You were going
part,
to
like
ask about
that's
the
the,
doc, yeah.
I love that you said this, because again, I look at what pro wrestling is now, sports entertainment is. I feel like Andy saw the vision for that. What Pee Wee's Playhouse became, I thought that Andy saw the vision
Yeah.
of that. And
Yeah.
this performance art stuff, this audience manipulation stuff. I believe, Wayne Gretzky has a very famous quote: "You don't go where the puck is, you go where the puck is going." Whether he
Yes,
knew
that
it
is
consciously or
One of
not,
Kevin Smith, my friend Kevin Smith, one of his favorite quotes is that,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. I really want to get Kevin on this show because I want to talk. Okay, we'll talk about this
Yeah.
off camera or whatever. I really want to.
You
There's
know,
a moment where
I
Kevin.
mean, Kevin loves Letterman. Yeah.
I know he does. I know he does. I would love to pick his brain about that, especially one particularly infamous moment where he could have been on the show and he passed on it. But the idea that
Hmm.
Kaufman,
I
whether
haven't
he
even
knew it
heard
or
that.
not,
That's
saw where the
wild.
puck was going, and of pop culture, of all pop culture, like some of these things that are there, the best wrestling angles are the ones that merge reality and whatnot. We're $1 billion company, you got these things that are there, and Andy was just being himself, but he gave us a blueprint and inspiration that, like you said, we're talking about all these years later. A lot of material has been written and produced about Andy. I am super curious about your perspective. The couple questions that I have to ask about the documentary are going to be, of course, what makes it different, and there's some very,
Yeah.
very cool things that make it different. The tapes, the puppet show aspect of it, the way that it's presented to us, phenomenal behind the scenes stuff. But then we get this other material that's out there. I'm super curious, Andrew, what your impression of the movie Man on the Moon was, because again, there's a lot of kind of blueprint of facts, but then there's a lot of sort of uh, spectacularness
Exaggerations.
to it as well.
Yeah.
And it feels like this documentary that you guys have all lovingly made, everybody playing their parts. Um, it doesn't seem like it has a lot of that fantastic stuff. It's just the actual material of what happened and how it happened, and it's very straight ahead compared to um, like I got Zamuta's book up here, and I mean, I'm curious about Zamuta if you've
I
talked to
noticed.
Zamuta.
Yeah.
Like, I've read this book many times, and just like the movie Man on the Moon, I see it and I go, okay, I wonder how much of this is real and how much of this is actually sensationalized a little bit. And
That's That's the Zamunda influence. It's no, I firmly believe Zamuta's one of the only people I will say in Andy's kind of uh orbit that I have not spoken to of the people that were alive when I started going down going venturing into Andyland.
yep, Andy Land.
Zamuta's Zuma is one of the only people that was not around. Not that he wasn't around, but one, I think he's the only person I didn't. I never interacted with.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, definitely Man on the Moon and and that book in particular, they've got a feeling. They do have that feeling of wondering, is it real? Is it not? Man on the Moon is like a greatest hits for the most part. It's a greatest hits of kind of Andy's career.
Yep.
It talks, you get to see everything, all these things recreated, and it's an interesting thing. But there was the spectacularness. Things were inflated, things were exaggerated. Carnegie Hall did not happen at the end of at the end of his career. It
Yep.
happened early on. It happened in 1979.
Yep.
While Taxi was still in his first season. So
Lauren Michaels wasn't the one who kicked him off SNL.
No, Lauren did not kick him off SNL. It was Dick Ebersol.
Yep.
The fact that Lauren went along with it always in Man on the Moon always kind of astounds me. I
Me
am
too.
kind of astounded that Lauren would go along with it. Because the thing is, he's playing himself, projecting a narrative that he's the one that said Andy Kaufman is no longer funny. And Lauren's was one of Andy's biggest supporters, because Lauren, and ironically, early on, so was Dick Ebersol before he wasn't.
Sure. Until he wasn't.
Until he wasn't, exactly. Yes. I mean, and that's the thing, by the way, people forget when they talk about Dick Ebersol kicked him off SNL. And he did, the Greek tragedy part of it is Dick is kind of the one that found him in Catch a Rising Star. Dick saw him, and then Lauren, of course, really, they had a very interesting kind of relationship. Very kind of like Lauren's always felt kind of protective of the cast, and even though Andy was never in the cast, Lauren had a protective feeling over Andy, in a way, even though they were not too distant in age. When Andy said he was going out to LA, and doing a sitcom, Lauren kind of had an interesting feeling about that. Lauren was kind of like, well, he was kind of worried that Andy was going to fall into kind of the trappings of Hollywood, and
yeah, he wanted to make sure he
because he
stayed
knew
pure,
that
kind of
there
a
was
thing. He
something
wanted to make sure he
special.
stayed the performance artist, as
Yeah.
opposed to, for lack of a better analogy, just getting a sitcom,
Right.
And,
Absolutely. He wanted to get kind of the performance of Andy pure, because that's the thing that is so fascinating about Andy, is that in the documentary, going back to the documentary,
yeah.
you get to hear Lauren talking about how important Andy was on these tapes. Not Andy's tapes, but so going back to the documentary a
Yes,
little
sir.
bit, what sets it apart is the fact that there is so much. Is the fact that those tapes allow you to get inside Andy's brain.
And how many hours are you talking? Is it 40? How many hours of
84.
tapes is it?
It's 84 hours.
84 hours. And when did you
84
first
hours.
become aware of these tapes? Because you've been in Andyland for a long time. When did you know these tapes existed?
I had heard that these tapes existed back in. Well, I first became aware when everyone else became aware, which is when there was a CD that came out a number of years ago called Andy and His Grandmother. So I became aware through that CD, and then at a certain point, I got to hear, being the archivist, I got to start listening to the tapes, and they're fascinating tapes, and it is the closest that, and it allows people to really understand how Andy was off screen, because the idea of the real Andy, I've started, my mind recently has kind of shifted a little bit into, I think Andy was no more complicated than anybody else was complicated. I think Andy was absolutely, like, when people say who's the real Andy, what they're really saying is not, oh, who was really him. What they're saying is, how was he off stage?
Right.
And how he off stage was, he was just as normal as anyone else. Like, obviously he had quirks, but so all of us have our own little individual quirks, but he was even in the 84 hours at one point, he calls someone and starts talking to a fan who wrote him a fan letter, and he starts saying, he's like, "Oh, so you really believe that I'm like," he's like, "You really believe that?" He's like, "I'm not that, no, I'm not like that. Like, that's a character. He spent his life in characters."
Yeah.
And he's like the insane character. He would do like an insane character. He would do this character, that character. Like, I mean, some of the characters would blur the line, but at the end of the day, there was a real person that would just call his grandmother and just have loving talks with the grandmother. And
Mhm.
I mean, that's the way to tap into Andy's mind, just listening to his interactions with his family and on these tapes. And in the documentary, they do use puppets. They use the Huey Williams is a book that Andy had written or was writing. And Andy's brother says, as much as Andy's performance is reflective of who he was, his writing is where you really get to go into his mind. And so what's interesting is on the 84 hours, they found they found I knew it was there. On the 84 hours, Andy talks through the Huey Williams story before he writes it.
Yeah.
So he's narrating the story over audio. And so when they did the documentary, they got to use Andy narrating this book without him having done an audio book. He was narrating what happens in this book that he had written. It is fascinating, fascinating stuff on those tapes. And speaking of tapes, I know we're on time, so I'm trying to cram all this in
Mhm.
that you had asked about. Speaking of tapes, I also want to bring up Bill Zamy. Bill Zamy, who was my mentor, he had
Yeah.
written Lost in the Funhouse, which I do think which I would call the true biography of Andy. If you want to read something about Andy, read Lost in the Funhouse.
Yep.
And yes, I implore people, please read that. It's it's basically as close as you're going to get into Andy's mind from someone else's kind of lens.
Yep.
But the tapes that Bill did over 100 interviews. Bill and Mike Thomas, who was in Bill's play at that point. Mike I guess Mike calls himself a legman, and Mike who wrote who was able to co-author Carson the Magnificent with Bill.
I was just gonna grab. It's just off camera here as you brought
Yeah,
up
it's
Bill
off
Simmons. I'm
camera
gonna
here too.
bring it
Yeah,
up here. Yeah, it's
Person the
fantastic as
Magnificent.
well.
Yeah, that was something the epic kind of ode to Johnny Carson that
Yep.
Bill spent so much time doing and Mike had finished. But yeah, Mike was the original kind of mentee for Bill's Lady long before I came into the picture. I when he first started working with Bill, I think I would have been about 2 or 3 years old. It's kind of my age.
This is one of the reasons I'm so fascinated with you, though, because
Yeah.
and I think we're maybe sort of cut from a similar cloth in this regard, in the sense that, we for whatever reason want to pass on certain elements of knowledge. And we have people that are in our lives that are older than us that give this knowledge to us, and we sit there like sponges listening to it, and we want to project it. We want to pass it on. We want to
Yeah.
keep these things going. And I'm so grateful that we have somebody who's young, who is the official Andy Kaufman archivist, because
Yeah.
I believe
Because
that
it needs to keep going.
yes,
Like beyond the next 20 years, it
yes,
needs to keep going, and
yes.
20, 30 years, it needs to keep going. So I do think having someone younger, I'm 32.
Hmm.
Which when I told Letterman, I have to bring it back to Letterman. We're on the Letterman podcast. When I told him that, he asked, "How old of a man are you?" And I told him, uh, 32. He said, "I am 4 times your age." And I'm like, "Well, hey, you look great, Dave, for 4 times my age." He's like, "Well, thank you." But anyway, yeah, I think having someone younger and kind of there, I think it definitely helps Andy's legacy in the long run. Because I'll be talking about Andy until the time I'm 80, and I'm totally grateful for
Exactly.
that. I'm never gonna stop talking about Andy because Andy, I think I you again, we're going back to questions you asked me earlier. Who had a great kind of quote? The Rock has a great quote in the article that I absolutely loved. And he was fantastic. I'd never talked to him. We're supposed to talk for 10 minutes. It wound up being 25. He did that thing like Letterman where The Rock starts asking me questions and want to know, was Andy happy? So that the fact that he wanted to know if Andy was happy, that I thought was really cool. But The Rock, I remember, told me that Andy was the epitome of humanity because he went down roads that no one else would go down. When he told me that, I thought that is so precise. That is so clear to me. And I thought that was so beautifully put.
Um, and his perspective, again, unique in so
Yes,
many ways. Like a lot of people don't realize, okay, so The Rock is a third generation
wrestler, yeah.
pro wrestler. Yeah. And when he came up early on through MCW, through Memphis
I'm,
Championship Wrestling, and worked with Jerry
yes.
Lawler. And
He wrestled there. I can't remember the name he wrestled under, but
Flex
he
Cavana
wrestled.
was the name. Flex
Thank
Cavana
you.
as
Flex
yeah.
Cavani. Thank you.
And a student of the
Yeah, he
game at
did.
that point, third generation. His grandfather was a promoter in Hawaii, and I gotta wonder, like when he finally got some FaceTime with Jerry Lawler, I wonder, like it's like when I've talked about this on the show many times. I hung up with Jimmy Hart, who hung up with Andy. He was married to Andy on the road because back then, good guys and bad guys weren't allowed to talk to each other, and so
Right.
Jimmy Hart would many times convey messages between Jerry and Andy on show night and things like that. And I'm super curious
Yeah,
if The Rock, who knows all this history and is a student of this, I'm sure it's probably one of the reasons why he wanted to be involved in this project. I'm wondering if he
absolutely.
talked to Jerry Lawler's ear off about Andy because
I don't think
Andy transcended the sport.
we never talked about that, but what he did tell me is he did tell me he didn't say directly it was Jerry, but he did say that he got to know people over the years from Andy's circle. So I'm assuming he's talking about Jimmy and Jerry.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming those are the people. But he would talk to them and they would talk to him about Andy's vulnerability. And you mentioned Howdy Doody. That's a big part of the documentary. Andy had this interaction with Howdy Doody, and The Rock told me that made him emotional. It didn't make it in the piece, but The Rock told me that was very emotional watching that for him. And it is. You're watching someone meet their hero.
Yep.
That's you're watching in real time somebody meeting their hero for the first time. And it's on camera. And the hero is a puppet, but
Yep.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he's real life, like he's real to Andy in that moment. Andy treats Howdy with so much respect. It is a real, vulnerable, authentic moment. And so when people say, oh, you don't get to see the real Andy Kaufman, that is him. That is real. Nothing about that is conflated. It is completely real. And even Michael has said that is the most authentic, probably real moment. That might be one of the most real moments in TV history, and it's with Andy and a puppet.
Yep.
It doesn't. I wouldn't even think of Howdy as a puppet in that moment. You think of Howdy as a symbol of Andy's childhood. Howdy is real as anything.
Um, I hate to end this because I could
I
talk to you about
know.
Andy Kaufman for hours, but I know
I
that
could. I hope I didn't ramble, and I hope I mean, I
oh
did ramble. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
no,
And
no, 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 no. Like this is the idea for this show to me was always I would have conversations with Shecky or I'd have conversations and Shecky had I mean he oh man, did he ever put up with my questions about Andy a lot.
Shecky,
The
are we talking
idea was
Shecky Green or
what's that?
Shecky who?
Oh, Rick Sheckman. Not Shecky
Sheckman.
Green. Rick
I'm
Sheckman who
like
works for
I'm like
Letterman
Shecky
Forever.
Green
Yeah,
knew
oh no,
Andy. That's
Shecky Green.
weird.
That would be a different show.
That would be a different show. I was a little confused. I'm like Shecky Green, huh? Wow.
When Rick and I would talk about like he indulged me so many times with these stories, it's just questions that I would ask, and we would get into these conversations around me. And I said, "This is what I want the Letterman podcast to be. I want it to be
Yes.
just a conversation." and literally the recorder is on, but you forget the recorder is on, and we just a genuine back and forth. I honestly believe that this world, um, I believe there's a reason why Dave in his long form is so effective. Long form conversation is so good, and to me, it's not rambling.
Yeah,
I love every word that has come out of your mouth today, and I'm so
I love
grateful,
that.
like I say, that you exist and that you're doing your thing.
Oh,
I
thank
can't
you.
wait for the doc to get its wide release.
Yes, we
I
don't know yet.
no,
And by the way, I am very much also on the outside of it. I was the archival consultant on the documentary. I've spoken with the director Clay.
Mhm.
I was emailing with him right before Tribeca, and because he was in the piece as well, and my understanding is that the who I've talked to that were there, my understanding is that the premiere Tribeca went well, and they are still looking for. I don't mind saying this because they've said this.
Yep,
I believe they're still looking for distribution. If it hadn't sold within the last week since it premiered Tribeca, which is possible, but I don't know.
yeah.
So I believe that they're still looking,
This is the
but
information
again,
I
I
have
don't
as
know.
well. All I know is that when they do release the digital version of it, whatever it is, I'll buy a physical one. Please put as many cutting room floor special features, anything like that. Please put as many extras on it as you possibly can. I'll
I
swallow it
have
up.
no say in it.
No, I know you don't. I'm just throwing it out to the Blu-ray
The
gods or the
ethers,
distribution
yes.
gods right
I
now.
hope they. There's so much. There's so. And by the way, the documentary gives you a little taste, a little appetizer of those 84 hours. I mean, what I've written about the documentary is that it is hard to get to the core of someone in an hour and 40 minutes.
Yep,
It would be hard to get to the core of someone who wasn't um, dedicated and devoted to keeping the audience guessing.
yep.
It would be hard to get to the core of someone who's just a standard banker or whatever, or a psychiatrist. It would be tough to get to the core of anyone, any human being in
Yep.
an hour and 40 minutes. But to get to the core of Andy Kaufman, it is really hard. But what I will say is the documentary definitely puts you in that right direction. And it
Um,
definitely you get to understand Andy off stage more. Not
yeah.
so much the real Andy, because I think it's a little arbitrary at this point. I think the idea of what is real, I think the idea of, because Andy was real.
Yep.
And I mean Andy was very real on stage. Um I think, yeah. So I think when people say who was the real Andy, they're really saying what was he like when the cameras weren't rolling. Um
Oh
that's
my,
all.
oh my God, Andrew, you buttoned it up. You went back to the beginning and you brought it around here. Like
Yes.
it's like you're a pro at these things. Thank you for
I just talk and I hope that what I'm saying makes sense at some point.
to me it does, and I don't know what that says about either of us, but I do know I'm grateful for you.
Thank you.
I'm grateful for every piece of material you put out. Thank you so much for I know how much you do for the love of the game and for the love of this stuff and how passionate you
That's
are.
all I do it. I don't
Yep.
do it for the money, that's for damn
Yeah,
sure.
no, hey,
Uh,
I feel you. I understand that, but that's okay because it scratches a different itch, and
yeah. I
it's
couldn't get this. Like, I wouldn't want to work. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else because I couldn't get what I get. What I get out of this industry I'm in is so much richer
yeah.
than money because I get to have a quality of life through it that and just get to experience things and get to talk to people I never thought I'd get to. That is so much more important than money. If my dad heard me saying that right now, he would probably get really upset. But sorry, Dad. It's true. It's absolutely true. I feel like experiences have so much currency to me as a person.
I feel the exact same way. The exact same way. And you articulated you do a good job sometimes of articulating thoughts that I kind of have that I
Appreciate
can't
it.
articulate. You just did it right there. I thank you,
Thank
Andrew.
you.
You're a friend of
Thank
the
you, bud.
show. I can't wait to have you back on for whatever
I'll
our
do it
next
anytime I can.
yeah, oh no, and I appreciate it
Anytime
very,
I
very
don't have
much.
pneumonia or anything, I'll be back.
Yeah, I guess we gotta keep the monitor going. The next time you're at your GP, let me know, and I'll be waiting
Yes.
with bated breath, meaning that you're gonna come on the show again soon. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Andrew.
Next time I'm sick.
Next time you're
It
sick,
means
that's
I'll
right.
be back on the show.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you for taking time to talk about Andy Kaufman with us today. This has been another episode of the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. That's Andrew Buss. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Dude.
Overcoat and underpants.